The lab's experience has been wonderful.
This is for the agents.
Real estate in a way that hasn't been done before.
Keller Williams is asking agents what they want and then doing everything possible to deliver that.
They're keeping it real simple. That means that our agents can be smarter.
High tech and high touch.
Break and rebuild.
Tell us what works, tell us what doesn't.
So that we can go out there and be the most impactful real estate professional with the human interaction and also live the life that we've been dreaming of.
One of the secrets to great success is to change your perspective on failure. Everyone experiences failures before they ultimately succeed. Some let their failures stop them. Some keep trying. You'll probably have to fail a few times before you get it right. Success is not about avoiding failure. Failure is about avoiding failure. Success is about trying. Fail fast, fail forward, fail often.
You guys can't see, but I have the one and only Gary Keller behind me and Seth Campbell.
Where? Here we are. We're here.
Here we go. Look at this. Woo-hoo. Here it is. We're just doing a quick command overview. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Great to see you.
This is command overview. So we're just doing commands, step-by-step instructions to get started. If you've never logged in, we're just walking through everything.
Perfect.
Awesome. So yeah, so that's what we're doing.
What day is this? I'm going to track the days. It's hump day, I guess we have to say. We have the hump day going on. And, well, first one I'd love to do to get started is, I'm intending to do one of these Wealth Building Wednesdays every month, as we go through this year. There'll be Wednesdays at least through April. After that, I have reserved the right to have Thriving Thursdays or some other weird acronym we'll come up with. If we have to have it on a Monday, what would be a good Monday name? What would we have to call it?
Money Monday.
Money Monday. I like that. There you go. Yeah, or Fabulous Fridays, or whatever we'll have to come up with. So as a bowl coach, I wind up traveling a bit. So this round, I know that Wednesdays work really good. So we'll have Wealth Building Wednesdays and get it kicked off. And what I would love to do to get started is just first introducing myself. I'm Steve Schluter. I'm the operating principal here for you guys that I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet. And I'd just love to take this opportunity to pour into you guys and share with you some opportunities, some thoughts about possibilities for your future, for or thriving financially. And this was put out there as a Wealth Building Wednesday course. And what I'd like to do is, first off, I'd like each of you introduce yourself. For the others in the room who might not know you, and if I don't know you, that will help me as well. And tell me why you're here today. Why did you show up? Did you just not have anything else to do, and I'm going to go hang out here? Hey, guys. And so let's each introduce ourselves and tell us how long you've been in real estate, because we're going to have a little conversation about our career and the possibilities in real estate and why you're here today. What's important to you about this course today? So why don't you start us off?
I'm Ann Weatherby. I got my license. Ann.
Okay.
I got my license in July, but I basically started at the end of October here.
Okay.
And I'm here to learn how to make more money.
It's all about making some more money, get the foundation so we can build that wealth. And the real estate career is our foundation of this. So please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
I'm about 3 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
And I am here because I go to everything in the beginning.
You're just taking it all in, being a sponge.
Fresh little puppy.
Yeah. Well, and what's great about that is that you never know that one little stimulation that you're going to get that's going to say, that puts me off in a direction that I hadn't even considered. And sometimes it's just that little distinctions that we make. So thanks for being here, Kelly. You guys get so new and starting to think and really being willing to go think big. Justin, introduce yourself and
Sure.
How long and why you're here.
I'm Dustin Sartoris. I have been an agent for 4 years now. I am here so I can help spread your knowledge to other agents in the market sector.
Okay, you're assuming I have some, so there you go. Okay, so there you go. Thank you for assuming that. So there you go.
I'm Judy Koppel, and I'm here because I want to see what Steve has to add to this, because I've been in the middle of this process.
Yeah.
So you'll have some new stuff, I'm sure.
How many years are you in real estate now, Judy?
43.
43. 44. Got me beat by 12. I'm going to catch you sooner or later, so we're going to get there. We're going to get there. And you know, one of the things we're going to talk about is something Gary Keller mentioned at Family Reunion last year. He had a conversation with us about falling in love with real estate again. And I want you to chime in on that later, because I mean, at 40 plus years in this business, you know, how do you keep the love for it? And I've always known you to have a passion for it. You still have it?
Still have it.
Still have it. You know,
for people,
and
for situations, for things, helping people, we don't want to talk about it now, I guess, but just helping people accomplish their goal about selling their house or about buying a house, and just really loving on people, I think, so they know you really care. I had the privilege of having Kelly come with me to the open house Sunday, and we just had a great time, and resaw some people that I'd already met once, and then some new people. And it's very important to keep that utmost, I think, because people feel it. They feel it.
I do. Please.
I'm Amanda Peterson. I started in September here. I have an amazing husband who does really good at taking care of us, but we have 3 little girls, and life is going to get really expensive. And so I need to figure out how we're going to take care of these other people and do all these things.
These little people, all right? That's it. Yes. Yeah. How old are the girls?
9, 7, and 4.
9, 7, and 4.
Tell them what your 4-year-old said.
Oh, she was in here with me the other day from 8:45 to 2 when we left. And at school pickup, she told the ladies that I stand with, I'm a realtor. And I was like, yeah, you are, baby girlfriend. You are. She goes, I learned it all.
She had her baby on her hip.
She had her baby on her hip, just like I had mine on my hip. We're all good.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is, of course, when you've got 3 or more kids, and I guess you could say 2 or more kids, or maybe even 1, it's like you're running a small corporation. I mean, just the demands of, well, how many things the kids into today? I mean, just the demands of their activities and how young they get introduced to them, you know.
She's about to start softball at 4, and we already have 1 in as well. It's great. Another one's gymnastics. It's great.
There you go. April, tell us about April. How many years real estate? Why are you here?
26 years in real estate, so a long time, still not as long as Judy over there. And I just recently, I worked for MAPS at Keller Williams Realty International, which is the MAPS coaching program some of you might be familiar with. So I am transitioning back into real estate. So it really wasn't real estate, but a service that we provide. And so I am basically here in the Market Center the past week and a half, just kind of job shadowing and seeing the culture here and meeting some of you. So thank you for having me.
All right, thank you. Robert
Sherwood, KW Commercial Division, so a little bit different flavor in the room. Been doing it for a little over a year, and I'm in here, unfortunately, just for a short amount of time because I know you got to sneak out. So I got to sneak out, but my purpose was to glean some, some knowledge from you. All right, we have some to share, right? So.
Perfect. We'll see. Okay.
I'm very new.
Who are you? You're Kay.
I'm Kay Payton.
Kay Payton.
And I started in May. With the help of my daughter-in-law, Rachel. And I'm very excited. I am retired from school, and I'm on my own, and I want to have some security. And so that's what my
You were telling me earlier in the parking lot, the teacher retirement, thing isn't all it's
not all it's cracked up
to be necessarily, right? And so, and of course, that what an honorable profession too, and people that pour so much into our kids, they deserve a good back end opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Adrian Earl.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, and I've been in practicing real estate for the last 13 years. And I am trained to be an investor agent. In that training, and I am in love with real estate. Right now, I'm looking to expand beyond the state of Texas with investment properties. So yeah, I'm here to hear what you have to say.
And I don't know if we'll get to it today, and yet there's a tool that Casey Jorgensen and I were sitting down one day, and we were talking about just investment opportunities. And when you look at the way that the Austin metropolitan area has appreciated, you're going, it feels like it's at the really high end, right? And so I'll make sure we pull it up today, because I think it's there's a website. Write this down, guys. It's in case I forget to mention it, It's FHFA.gov. It's FHFA.gov. And so a friend of mine owns about, I think he owns about 60 rentals right now, and 42 of them are in Denver, where he's headquartered. And Denver has gotten extremely pricey, yes? And they started to expand their horizons. They said, okay, where are we gonna, we've got to find a different market where it's just steady and stable. And they wound up, now their target investment area is Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so they're investing significantly in Tulsa because the numbers make sense. And it doesn't mean that if you want to make real estate investments, you go to Tulsa, Oklahoma right now. It might be, maybe you go to Lubbock, Texas, right? Maybe you go to Lubbock, Texas. She got her guns out. And so, and yet, how do I even know if that's a place I should look? Maybe there's parts of the country where you have family, or you've got kids going to college, or something like that, where you say, okay, it would make sense for me to buy something there, and yet, how do I look at that market and see if it's a viable opportunity? And the House Pricing Index quarterly report that FHFA.gov puts out gives you some pretty powerful insights. I might just kick off with that here in a minute. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Does that sound interesting?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just kick off with that. So thank you for that. You stimulated some good stuff right there. Yes, sir.
Greg O'Donnell, and I have.
Tell me again your name.
Greg O'Donnell.
Greg.
Yeah, and I just realized that my real estate career has now spanned 2 decades.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, since 2 weeks ago. I've been licensed for a year.
Mm-hmm.
That was funny. I thought more people would laugh.
Working on it, Greg. I tell you. That happens to me all the time. I think I'm.
Right now, I'm just really kind of trying to find my niche. So
Yeah.
I'm working with buyers a little bit, so I'm feeling myself in that direction.
Yeah.
See what other opportunities are out there.
Perfect. Thank you. Tara.
Tara Knight, I've been a realtor for 15 years. I got in this business because I love to look at homes. I still love to look at homes, but I came because I'm never going to pass the opportunity to listen to you speak.
Oh, that's way to suck up, girl. I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I like you here.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Please.
Kim Whitlock, I've been in the business and with the same broker for 18 years. And completed demand, so that's all.
Oh, Kim, thank you.
This place should be a lot more accountable at this point.
Well, you're here. That's what matters. So there you go. Yeah, and Kim, guys, these two have been great leaders for a long time. Judy, all these folks have been with us for so long, and Kim, you've always led so much of our Red Day things over the years and things. I just want to thank you for all those contributions, because how old are those girls now?
Oh God, LSU.
LSU. Oh, that was hot on Monday night, right?
Good week. It was a good week.
Good week.
And my fee bill was due, so I paid that too.
There you go. Awesome. Yes, sir.
Gary Curran, I came here about 4 years ago to Texas. I'm from Massachusetts. I also retired, sold the business. Got sick of doing nothing. Tried to buy a house in Houston. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I couldn't buy a house. I had to bring a check after a week. They kept saying, well, it's a hot market. In Austin, very hot market. I said, what's going on around here? Did a little research and moved here and got involved in real estate. Had a license for about 3 years. I'm getting my feet wet. I'm here elevating to learn.
Yeah.
Before I earn. That's the plan.
Well, you can do both simultaneously, all right? Tell me your first name again.
Gary.
Gary. Okay, thank you, Gary. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Last but not least.
Kristen Williamson. Lived here for almost 20 years, moved up to Oregon. I got my license up there. I started, so I'm up third year in. Came back in 2018 and then got licensed here. I was with another company, just moved over to Keller a month ago, and actually my team lead, she moved over too, so she's going to be here in a minute.
Cool.
Stacy, she should be here.
Good old Stacy, yes.
Mentor.
Yep.
And she was excited. She wanted to get here, but she had a listing appointment. Anyway, she's coming. That's not, what else?
So what brought you here to something on wealth building?
I'm in debt. I need to get out of debt. So anything that I can learn, any tricks I can learn, anything that's going to spark the thing that you just said, you can get something out of every class that'll go, think of that. That's really good.
Just a little tool. Just the biggest challenge with anything is starting. Yes. You know, and I think, you know, if we find ourselves in debt or something like this, it just we don't think we can start, right? And I'm who's familiar with Acorn app? Anybody familiar with Acorn? A couple of you. You know, it could be, you could start your investment journey at 25 cents on every purchase you make. And, you know, using something like Acorn, and I'll talk to you about Acorn here in a little bit as well. And 25 cents doesn't sound like wealth building, and yet it all starts where? With the first decision. And so let me go back. I want to pull up that FHFA.gov, and I went ahead and I had downloaded the document already. So when you go to FHFA.gov. Let me actually go there so you can see how I got here. And so you get to this website, you're going to FHFA.gov, and you'll see that you're at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and all you're going to do is scroll down to the bottom of the landing page, and you're going to see something right here that says FHFA House Price Index. Robert, this will be worth the cost of admission for you today, right here. So, yeah, and so you download, you just click download, and when you click download, it's going to give you a choice of reports and plans. And what you're looking for is the U.S. House Price Index quarterly report. Now you notice fourth quarter isn't posted yet because it's what? It's too early, right? They haven't aggregated all the data from the fourth quarter. Yet the third quarter report is there. I have already downloaded it. Yeah, it might, yeah. And so now, by the way, you look at this report, it's 83 pages. You don't need to read all 83 pages. You know, there's a bunch of stuff in here. And yet if I'm looking at, so here you've got a section on national statistics. And we know that most people are not concerned as much about what's happening nationally as what's happening where? Local hometown. And yet, you know, there's a whole section here on national statistics by quarter, going back, you know, many years. So we're going all the way back to 1991. This shows you seasonally, everybody say seasonally adjusted price change measured by a purchase-only index. And, you know, and this, again, you can learn about all this. Here's one, house price appreciation over previous 4 quarters. So here you go back and you see what was happening during the, you know, Great Recession, right? You know, here we were seeing home price appreciation by quarter was actually going down, and then of course we started to rebound in 2000. Make that little thing go away. That would be 11, 12, and you know, you'll see what's happened since then. Now here's where it gets interesting. Let's go into, here's an interesting one. Monthly house price index for the USA, going all the way back to January 91. Now look at the curve we were on. And then somewhere in, you know, the early 2000s, we start having subprime loans. We were stimulating the economy. We're doing all these things to get more people in housing, and the economy is booming. And look at the curve that begins to happen in home prices. And is a hockey stick curve in housing values unusual? It's not sustainable. And yet I want you to look at this for a second. If you just took out the curve we were on before that, and you just extended it, we'd probably be somewhere about here, yes? So we're a little high right now, and yet not abnormally high where we should have been, probably about here, and we were there. And so you could see it was getting set up for a fall. Now, if you were watching things like this, could you see some of these things coming? Yes. You know, you might be able to see them, but like, that's a problem. That's not real sustainable. And yet, although we're a little high versus the long-term trajectory, a recovery usually has a pretty strong rebound until it kind of mellows a little bit. And Yet it doesn't appear that there's forces that are going to cause it to mellow real soon. Well, there could be some, but we're not going to talk about that in this room. State statistics. So you've got state statistics here, what's happening by state. Let's see the state with the highest one-year return on real estate. Who'd have thought it was Idaho? Maine, number 2. You know, you've got, for the period ended September 30th, Hawaii's in there. So Texas, in terms of, you know, 1 year, you know, taking in the whole market, Texas came in at 4.88%. And since 1991, 203%. Now that's taking all your rural areas, that's the whole state. That's not going into your, you know, heart of Austin and places that are booming and that are, you know, wildly out of control maybe. And yet this is still not local. Now this is a map. Now by the way, these things are things you can copy and paste and put into what? You know, newsletter. Our AutoConnect, you know, newsletter we built. Some of the statistics we get from here. Right, we come in here and we, you know, make some forecasts based upon what we see, and, you know, look for the patterns. So the dark blue is where it's blowing out, and the look what's going on with Illinois. Not so great. Yes, yeah. Corruptions and shootings are not good for business, I guess. So let's go into. We're still not local. Now let's go into metro area. Now you notice I'm scrolling through a lot of stuff, so this is if you just can't, if you got insomnia, this is good stuff. So you go now we get to page 33, and I've got metro area stats. So we get into metro. Come on in.
What's out building well?
Hey, well, that's all right. So we have metro area stats, and now by the way, let's take a look at. Now this is alphabetical. And let's look at Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown. So the Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown area last year saw 4.63% as an MSA. So that's going to take in the whole metro area. Now the quarter kind of got a little quiet in the third quarter according to these statistics. We had 5-year of 43%, and yet look at since 1991, Austin, Round Rock, 385%. Now, compare that to, well, let's go take, you know, my friend who started investing primarily in Oklahoma. Let's go compare this to Oklahoma. So we have 386%, let's call it right here. And now let's go to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Now, 172%. So that's about half of what Austin's done in 5 years. So I mean, it hasn't had the hyper growth, correct? It's been more steady. And of course, their focus has been Tulsa. So let's go take a look at Tulsa. You know, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know, annual 1 year, 5.2, quarter. Now, they got a strong quarter right now. That in 1 quarter, is that strong? Yeah, 5 years, 26%, just healthy, and 146% since 1991. Now compare that to 386%. Which one has more downside for a long-term investment? Austin. You know, if the economy squatted and some things went a little sideways, would your downside risk be minimal in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now? Yes. Yeah. Now, somebody give me a place where you say, yeah, you know, I'd love to own some real estate in blank. And maybe it's a place you have family. Let's go look at Lubbock, Texas over here, Tara. Now, I don't know if it'll probably be Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, or something like that. JKLM. Lubbock doesn't show up on this because it's not part of a big metro. Now, here's the thing. These are metro areas. Now you go a little deeper into this, and you have a section that is on cities that are let me go to unranked metropolitan areas. So these are the ones that they're smaller metro areas, not part of a big MSA. And so now we get into, let's look at Lubbock just for grins. Is Lubbock not on there? No? Man, didn't make the cut. Somebody else give me a town. Let's look at Killeen Temple. Amarillo. Let's look at Amarillo.
It's not on there.
Abilene was.
Abilene was the Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge. Let's go to Baton Rouge. Call it Baton Rouge. No, let's go to, there's one more report.
That's sort of in our area.
Yeah, let's go to one more report. These are metro areas. We got to go to city. So.
I was still on the metro area. I saw that move, sorry. Y'all back up, my bad.
Okay, so we're going to go. Y'all getting dizzy watching that? I'll tell you when I get there if you need to close your eyes. It freaks me out when I watch stuff like that. Let's see. I guess that was the city report. So yeah, some of them are just too small to be ranked as far as that goes, or there could be another search where we could locate that. And yet, you think about this. Where's a place? Where's a metro that you might have family or State College, PA? What's happened there? You're going, well. 5 years, 22%, 1 year, 7.3%. So use it. It's a cool tool. I wonder if let's see. So Lubbock probably, maybe it was under Midland, because that's all close enough. Well, you guys get the idea, and you know where to get it, correct? Yeah. And so I just wanted to share that with you. I think it's a pretty amazing resource to examine and be familiar with what's happening in our real estate world. All right, let's go back here. All right, now that we know why we're here, let's jump into this thing. So, I'll pull myself right here. So when we think about wealth, I was going, where do I really want to take this conversation? And because we're kicking it off as a series, and we're going to do this once a month. I thought we'd just start kind of broad, and then we'll, as we get together, future times go a little bit more narrow. Would that be okay? Yeah. And so, how many of you have read any Robert Kiyosaki? Okay. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the book he's most famous for. This is Cashflow Quadrant. If there were two books by Robert Kiyosaki that I would say read these books, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Cashflow Quadrant. And what I love about them is they're simple. They're really just simple understandings of what the journey is, towards wealth. And the cash flow quadrant, let's see if I can figure out which one's this is got a laser on it. Whoops, that wasn't it. Okay, way to go, Steve. Think about this thing called the cash flow quadrant, and he talks about really the left side versus the right side. And he goes, now by the way, how many of you are at some point in the recent past an employee of somebody? Okay. So you worked for somebody, you had a job. Why did you leave the job? To become self-employed. Somebody chime in. Why'd you leave?
To work for yourself and make your own money, not make somebody else rich.
Okay, I want to make it for myself, make it for my girls, have a little control, flexibility. Get kids, got to have flexibility. So we go from having a job to being self-employed. Now, there's certain limitations of being an employee, correct? What are some of the limitations when you work for somebody else?
Follow their rules.
Got to follow their rules. Okay. What else? Their schedule. When and how.
There's a cap on what you can make.
Yeah, no matter how hard I work, maybe I'm kind of capped right now. And so there's really not any leverage, and my income is fixed to a pay scale or a job or whatever the case may be. Now, then I become self-employed, and what are some of the limitations or challenges as well as opportunities of being self-employed? Let's start with the challenges first.
No vacation.
Oh, no vacation?
24/7 24.
You giving up vacation?
24/7. It's hard. It's all around the clock.
24/7, round the clock.
Gotta work in the business.
You're working in the business. So it's dependent on what?
Leverage.
It's dependent on you at a really high level. I got to show up. And if I don't show up, then things stop.
You're gonna be back to the heat.
I get, yeah, there's that, right? Yeah, it's like, I mean, I go start looking for a job again, right? You know, it's like, gosh, you know, at least there I got a paid vacation, and it could be that. So those are some of the negatives. What's the upside of being self-employed? We called some of them the reasons you became self-employed. What else?
Own schedule.
Own schedule.
Opportunity. Huge opportunity.
What was that, Stacy?
Opportunity. There's no top to the top.
There's no top to the top.
Yeah. The only ceiling is kind of your time, right? You know, it's like if I don't have leverage, you know, because this, and so what Kiyosaki says, the left side, you know, is the biggest challenge with the left side is it lacks leverage. And the right side is, you know, I'm a business owner. And business owner means you own a system that works for you. Now, you take Keller Williams, the millionaire real estate agent, is it built on a foundation of models and systems?
Yes.
You bet it is. And by the way, if you apply that into your self-employed business, could you ultimately build it into or self-employed job, could you build that into a business? Less reliant on you all the time. Now, it doesn't mean you have to, it just means you could. Right? If I choose to have leverage in my life, the right side is the leverage side. And then as I generate revenue on the business side, or as a self-employed person, I'm going to want to make some investments. And so investments was where money works for me. You know, a business is where a system and people possibly work with me. And that's the leverage side of the equation. And so, as we dig into this today, one of the things, this is kind of going to be foundational to our conversation, and I want to start the conversation with something Gary talked about at family reunion. So I went through and pulled his speech, and he was talking about why agents fall out of love with real estate. And then we're going to talk about how to stay in love with real estate. And so, now you probably can't read all that, and yet I'm going to send you all these slides. If I'll make sure I get all y'all's emails before you. If somebody will hand around an email sheet or something, I'll make sure that I send you all my slides. And then, so here's what he says, and let's see if y'all can even read this thing. Turn the light off over there if you don't mind. Oops. Sorry. A little hard. So the first one says they don't know what to do or how to do it. And of course, Gary says it all comes, now this is why agents fall out of love with real estate. He said it all comes down to leads, listings, and leverage. He said focus on lead generation from 3 sources and add more as you go. Now it doesn't say 13 sources, does it? You know, just get 3 nailed down. Get 3 that you're really great at, you know they're working for you. Then he talks about too much to do, too little time. He said this is a simple business when you focus. There's lead generation and then there's everything else. You'll never have to worry about money if you build your time around time blocking for lead generation. Y'all believe that? Yeah. And by the way, he says lead generation. He doesn't say, you know, necessarily lead buying and everything else. I was in a bold room yesterday in Allen, Texas, and had a mega agent in the room, does about 150 transactions a year. And as we went through what we call the pain and pleasure exercise, he came up, shared with the room. He said, the problem with my business is not sustainable from a profit perspective. He said, I paid $164,000 to Realtor.com last year and $72,000 to Zillow. Add that up. It's over about 241,000 he paid for leads. He did 150 transactions at, you know, 7,000 a piece. Yeah, so what's that? It's a lot. It's a lot. You know, and yet then it's his, you know, split with his buyer's agents and everything else. He was making less than 10% on his business. So I said, we have to get back to just, working relationships. Then failure to follow a plan. He says, Gary said, plans fail when you get complicated. So keep things simple. Focus on growing your business and running it. Complexity will show up naturally as your success requires attention to detail. Overcommitment. What happens is life happens and we don't lead generate anymore. We have to find people to do business with us. Your life is not defined by the yeses you say, but by the no's. What is he telling us there?
You can't do the things you do well and say yes to the things that you do well, but don't say yes to everything just because.
Yeah.
And say no if that's not going to take you anywhere. Don't do it.
To get really clear on what matters and spend your time and your energy there, right? Don't overcommit. Poor hiring. If you're in the business with the wrong people with no standards and no accountability, it will inevitably lead to more drama, and soon you'll get your job back because you won't stay in business with the wrong people. We lose the fun. He said the moment you've lost the ability to connect what you do once you've lost the ability to connect what you do to how it helps people or invest in your lifestyle instead of people or lead generation, you lose the joy. It's important to keep your big why and priorities in front of you to keep from drifting and keep life exciting. So, I love this, when you talk about, still having it be fun, you've got to find a way to make this career joyful for you. And start affirming that it can be, because it is for a lot of us, right? Now, why to love real estate today? Here's the cool thing: low cost of entry with unlimited potential. And this is the good part of real estate, and it's the bad part of real estate. Right? It's the low cost of entry where somebody goes in. Of course, they calculated it was $2,563 on average to get started in real estate. Contrast that with an insurance agent, $5,200, a CPA, about $18,000, and an attorney, $122,000. He said real estate agents also have unlimited earning potential. The earnings of an average individual trend to peak around about age 48 to 49 in the normal world. And yet in real estate, that isn't the case. There's no ceiling in this business. You can make as little or as much as you want. And I really believe it so much. It truly is one of those businesses where you get out of it exactly what you put into it. And you can get it, just because you have a license doesn't mean success. And I think that, some people say, well, I'm going to give real estate a try. And they go get a license and they get in and they realize, oh, there's real work involved here. And they go from wanting to give it a try to going, I'm not so sure. Freedom to choose your work, another reason to fall in love with real estate. He said, in real estate, you can build your business around your strengths and passions. You can match your personality to a lead generation tool that could be successful. So there's lots of ways to do it, yes? And find one that fits you. High financial return for effort given. There's a myth that if you work longer hours, you'll make more money. And he says, what I found is most people use time to cheat. Long hours are not virtuous at the end of the day. If you work smarter instead of harder and prioritize, you can have a better, bigger life. There are times in your life where you'll have to throw away the alarm clock and work, but that shouldn't be a lifestyle. Write this down. I want you to write this down. Instead of working overtime, work focused time over time. Work more focused time over time. The challenge is, it goes back to what we were talking about, too many overcommitments possibly, right? And we're saying yes to too many things, and go back and say, instead of working overtime and using time to cheat, use focused time over time. And that comes right out of the One Thing book, page 81, by the way. Right in the One Thing book, this is where Gary says it's the biggest challenge is, if you'll focus on your one thing, you're using focus time. And then, by the way, if you do focus time at a high level over time, will you get great results? Yes, ma'am. Got it. And then lastly, next to lastly, inside opportunity to invest. Now this was the big one that hit me, and this is why I pulled the FHFAgov thing up for you a while ago. Is that he said there's a big difference between being in the real estate business and being in the listing and selling business. The minute someone shares with you that they'd like to list their house, your first reaction should be to buy it. If you have the deal, the money will show up. And he said, here's the thing, he talked about his family reunion. He said, how many great deals happen in the real estate purchase industry where a real estate agent had that listing? Most of them, yes. And he goes, that means 90+% of the great deals go through some real estate agent's hand first before they go to somebody else's hand. And he said, why aren't y'all buying more of them? And now there may be some markets like this right now where it goes, well, as a buy and hold, it may not make as much sense. And yet there are other markets out there. Or, it may be that occasional opportunity does show up, and when it does, am I looking at everything through the eyes of a potential buyer? So I remember, one of the first houses I bought was on Rich Creek Road in, what's the name of that subdivision? Off Burnett and Anderson over there, Crestview. And bought it as an expired listing, and this was 1990, probably 1990. And an expired listing, and I went and looked at it. It was vacant. They lived off Greystone in Mesa over there. Yeah, off Mesa. And went to their house after I looked at it, and I'm walking through it, I'm going, how do I buy this? And challenges, I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And yet we were in a big recession. This is when, the market had crashed, the savings and loan prices. Real estate was what back then?
18% interest.
It was ugly, yeah. Well, interest rates were starting to come down at that point, not much, and yet you had the savings and loan crisis, you had the oil problems, you had a lot of things going on, the housing. Who's familiar with the term short sale? During that time, in 1987-88, Austin, Texas invented the short sale. And the subdivision that invented the short sale was Wells Branch. Because Wells Branch was built at the absolute peak of the market. And, a home that was selling Wells Branch for $150,000, ultimately came down to about $75,000 to $80,000 when the market adjusted. So, what the rest of the country had, in the 2008, 9, 10, we had ours back in the late 80s, early 90s, we started to recover. And at that time, if your powder was dry, the buying opportunities you had were tremendous. My friend George Castleberry just, I remember him buying a Fannie Mae foreclosure duplex, 3-2 on one side, 2-2 on another, for $72,000 with a 5-4-3-2-1 buy down off of 9%. Was that a sweetheart deal or what? Yeah, and those deals were abundant. They were crazy abundant. And so asking yourself, and if you find the right deal, can you find the money? I mean, if you find a really good deal and you don't have the money, who should you call?
Well, my kids think it's me.
Well, if the kids think it's you, okay. Well, call somebody who has the money and has the credit, right? Who can you partner with? If the deal's there, the money is always available. It's go tie it up, write a contract and or a sign if you must, or, and then go find the money. This building, we bought this building when none of these buildings had a single person in them. And, they were sitting here in foreclosure, and Don got the listings on the building, and we were the first buyers. And we bought this building for, I want to say $69 or $70 a square foot. It wasn't infill. We had to infill it. And yet, when they built it, they were into it, not infill, for about $155 a foot. So, and we bought it for less than 50 cents on the dollar. And by the time we infilled it, we were into it for like 132 of it. Still a great deal, right? And so you look for those opportunities, and there you go. Privileged to help people with their greatest asset purchase. Now, by the way, this has to get fun for you. If all we see people as is $1, is that going to get tough over time? Because it just becomes, it doesn't have quite the joy. And it's okay to like the kill and like the business and everything else, and yet you got to do it for making a difference, at the end of the day. So I go through that because I think part of this, if we go back to Kiyosaki, is right now this world of our self-employed life, if we don't have joy in that, is it going to make us getting to the next level of business owner and all that much tougher? What do you think? It's going to be tough. And so, however you have to go line that up, whether you have to find a niche that's different or, realign, how you approach your business, find your way to just to falling in love with real estate again. It'll make the rest of what we're going to talk about vital. If you're not in love with it, it's going to be hard to just, yesterday in Bold, we had First Step to Bold. And is anybody here taking the 6 Personal Perspectives class? No? Okay. In the 6 Personal Perspectives class, one of the first perspective is commit to self-mastery. And when you hear the word self-mastery, what do you hear in that? What do you think self-mastery is? Anybody have a thought? What's that?
Education, discipline.
Education, discipline. Okay. Yes, sir? Discipline. Yeah. Time blocking. Yeah. All those things would fit into it, and yet, it's a lot of times when we think about mastery, we think about somebody who's mastered a skill or they've mastered a topic. And the truth is, you'll probably never master a skill or master a topic until you master what first? Yourself. If you've got bad disciplines and habits where you sleep to the crack of dinner every day, right? That's going to be a problem, right? And so first you have to master self. And I don't think anybody ever masters self. Does anybody know a black belt in a martial arts that's a really high level, maybe multi degree black belt? Anybody know anybody that's like that? What are they pretty disciplined in a lot of areas?
Absolutely.
Most areas.
Several degrees from school, plus national championships, plus their own schools, plus their own business, plus their own house, plus their own family.
Plus.
They keep going, and they don't stop.
If you peel the onion back, I think what you would probably find is they didn't show up that way because they had mastered martial arts or any of that, and that's how they got a great business. It's they had the disciplines of somebody that could master the martial arts. With the discipline to show up and practice, with the discipline to put in the time, with the discipline, to build good habits, with all of those things. And if you find yourself struggling to get up in the morning, if it's snooze, or if it's other issues that are causing us not to be in command of self, probably the rest of it's going to be a struggle. And so your number one journey, or what are the habits that I've got to develop that makes me a master of me? Do I have to get some study habits, some learning habits, some practice habits, some getting out of bed habits, suiting up and putting on clothes to go to work instead of staying in my PJs? Whatever it is making those decisions. So, can I give you a big wealth building lesson? I'm going to tell you about the biggest wealth building mistake I ever made. What do you think the biggest mistake I ever made is?
Passing up on opportunity?
Nah.
Miracle and prison.
Having the wrong partner in your life. I just, who in here is single? Okay. So the rest of you, you got what you got. So there you go. Yeah. And I want you to, I think this is really important as parents as well. you know, I look at everything that was modeled for me when I was a kid. You know, my grandparents had great relationship. My mother died when I was 11 years old, so my dad was kind of in a depressed state, so I didn't have any modeling right there. And then, you know, in adult life, the first person I married, you know, I guess, you know, you're young, and at that point, I guess I'm 25, 20, something like that. And you think you know what you know, or you know, you got it figured out, and doesn't work out. Well, that little house I bought on, you know, Rich Creek Road for, you know, $67,500. By the way, owner finance with $1,250 down. Yeah, you know, and so my ex-wife sold some years later for $382,000. So, you know, $300,000 plus equity went where? Somewhere else.
You that now.
What's that?
You think you have that now.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so I remarried later, a little bit later in life, and just as I was coming to Keller Williams. And then I'm starting to build assets and, you know, open market centers and, you know, do these things, get involved in a region and some of these things with Keller Williams. And that marriage goes south, and I wind up with a divorce mortgage for about $600,000 and other equities, and that's not counting child support, things like this. And so just in two decisions that were a bad relationship or the wrong relationship, that was how much money? $1 million. $1 million. You know, of course, all that's been paid off a long time ago, and it's gone. And yet, you know, think about the compounding effect of that if it had been working for me, you know, and or the right person or the right partner, you know, in my life. And so one of the biggest mistakes you can make about wealth is putting into the wrong relationship, you know. And of course, by the way, when you have relationship challenges, that pull your mojo back a little bit. You know,
think about what you learned, though.
Oh, you think of all that you learn. Yeah, it's a high price of entry to learn some of this stuff. I tell you, it's like, yeah.
Worth every penny.
Well, you know, and by the way, I wouldn't trade any of it today, and yet it's $1 million setback, right? And yet, you know, the lessons learned, I got two wonderful daughters, and would never trade them for the world. And yet, you know, you think about what you know, as a parent, you know, I've got to really raise my kids to understand what a healthy relationship is, and what that looks like, and what that means, and help them make good choices. And they're probably going to, you know, 50% of them are going to screw it up anyway, right? You know, and yet it doesn't have to be our 50%. You know, I think, you know, what do we teach our kids about choices and relationships? Take that relationship through the career visioning process. You know, as we teach her. And yet that's just one of those lessons, is understand, you know, as you start to build assets, is that you live in Texas, and guess what?
It's community promise.
It's 50%. It's going the other way. So we go back to this, you know, this conversation about the cash flow quadrant, and, you know, we're talking about employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. And I want you to, you know, if you've read Kiyosaki, Kiyosaki has a board game, and the board game is called Cashflow. Has anybody ever played Cashflow?
We have the youth one and we have the adult one.
You have it? Yeah.
I don't play with anybody in here.
Yeah, you can play with anybody out here. In April, you've got it as well?
Exactly. I even bought the kids. They had the children's book.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Guys, this is one of the best ways to learn financial literacy. It's a board game. Now you'll see the scorecard over here. On one side, it's an income statement. On the other side, it's a balance sheet. And so when you play the game, the goal is to get is to build your asset column, reduce your liability column, and on the income statement is to get your passive income to surpass your expenses. And, you know, and how you win the game is you have the best net passive cash flow. And it's a lot of fun to play. I've played it with my daughters, and it actually, I've read books, you know, on Dow theory, and I've read Benjamin Graham's book. And you go to who's the guy in Omaha? Buffett. You know, Warren Buffett read Graham's book a dozen times after he failed as an investor to understand his theories. And of course, Warren Buffett is arguably the best investor in the universe. And then I play, and of course I'm playing Cashflow. And by the way, a book like that, I haven't read it a dozen times. I read it one time and I struggled to read it one time. And I didn't have the perspective of Warren Buffett, who had, his all the experiences he'd been through and where, the learning path he'd been on. And I'm going, this isn't really helping me. And then taking what I learned from Kiyosaki from a board game really was one, and then some things that Gary Keller had, a track that Gary Keller had sent us on 20 years ago. Yeah.
One thing that Gary Keller teaches, and we know it, we've taught it to us, and he's taught it to us, is lead with revenue. That was revolutionary for us, Richard and myself. Lead with revenue. Because what are we taught usually,
Throw money at things, right?
Go borrow as much money as you can, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this board game, Cashflow, and it's not cheap. It's like a couple $100, and yet it'd be one of the best things you ever bought. And this little wheel, this little wheel in the middle is called the rat race, and you're stuck on the rat race until your passive income exceeds your expenses, and then you go what's called on the fast track, and you're building wealth. And as you draw these cards and you land on certain spaces, one of the cards says, okay, you have an opportunity to buy X number of shares of such and such stock. Now, by the way, the stock has been trading at this level. Its 52-week high is this, its 52-week low is this. Now, if the card said the 52-week high is $50 a share, and the low is $30 a share, and it's currently selling at $49.5 a share, the literacy of this is saying you probably want to do what on that one? Buy or pass? Pass. Because it's kind of at a max spot in the last 12 months. It's seen all this upside. And by the way, what was the floor it came from? It came from a floor of 30 up to 49 and some change. Is that a big growth percentage-wise? That's a huge growth percentage-wise. So that one looks like it's got more downside than upside. So you pass on that one. So I go and I'm going around the rat race and I get another card and it says, okay, you can buy Boeing at $331 a share. And its 52-week low is $320 a share, and its 52-week high is $418 a share. Buy. Right? And so, there, and I'll tell you more about why I said Boeing in a minute. I said that very much on purpose. Okay? Because Boeing has some issues right now. It's called the 737 what? Max. Fired the CEO. Got a new CEO. And so, they got some issues. A couple of plane crashes, and the new plane that they got a bunch of them. I was in Seattle a few weeks ago, and I'm driving, flying to SeaTac, and I'm driving right by Boeing's, headquarters where their airport is, and there are Maxes parked all over that place that they can't do nothing with, right? And they're sitting there. Those things aren't cheap. Yeah. And so I bring this up, purposefully, because there's some things I want to share with you. Sir John Templeton. Now, Sir John Templeton was considered, he's passed away, he was considered the ultimate value investor and stock picker extraordinaire. And I listened to a podcast, an interview from him from years ago. And one of the things that, let's read what he says. He said, bull markets are born on what? Pessimism. He said, they're grown on skepticism, they mature on optimism, and they die on euphoria. He said, the time of maximum pessimism is the best time to buy, and the time of maximum optimism is the best time to sell. Now, he's not talking about just index funds or anything like that. He's talking about stock picking. And how much pessimism is around Boeing right now? Mucho. Do you think it's maybe at maximum pessimism?
Pretty close, yeah.
Pretty much, because they just released some internal emails, made the news the last few days about, plane built by clowns, supervised by whatever, and these were internal emails from engineers and stuff like this. New CEO started Monday, and as I was driving here today, I had the radio on. I was listening to the U.S.-China trade deal signing that happened today. And, all the pomps and circumstances and the Chinese delegates and, and the heads of all kinds of industries are at this event, including 2 executives, the new CEO and another executive from Boeing. And President Trump, during the conversation, he's introducing all these heads of industry, and he's talking to the Boeing guys. He says, you guys got to turn that around. He said, Boeing he said, I just learned this week that Boeing is considered to be 0.5% of U.S. GDP. Is that a big part of the economy? The trailing effect of suppliers and everything that impacts, 0.5% of GDP, one company. And so GDP being gross domestic product, so our economic impact, it has that much impact. Now, by the way, is the government or anybody going to allow that to fail? I mean, how many of us, if we get on the airline, get on a Boeing aircraft? They got a long track record of high-level success. The 737's been the workhorse. I 99.89% believe they're going to turn it around. And so I was sitting there, and I've got them on my stock ticker. I've been watching them, and I've got a little bit of research to do, and I've got my SEP contribution from last year and some other money that I've had just left sitting aside, and I probably by the end of this week will put it all into Boeing. I'm going to put about $80,000 into Boeing and just that SEP contribution and a little bit more into Boeing, because if it's got a $418 high that it's had in the last 52 weeks, and it's currently at 331, and 52-week low's been like 315 or something like that, feels like a pretty safe upside. What one thing has to happen for that stock to have a 10% bump up? There's just one thing that has to happen. What's the first thing? That's my opinion. I'm not an expert. It's my opinion.
Fix the problem.
The first 737 MAX 800 has to take off on a commercial flight. As soon as the first one flies again, and they get their certification, you're probably going to see a 10 or a 15% bump. That could be 3 months, that could be 6 months, and yet as soon as it does, I expect a big bump. They've priced it down for all the legal settlement, and by the way, they've already had a lot of their legal settlements and settlements with the airlines for lost revenue. So that's all accounted for in their pricing right now, isn't it? They're not going to have, those hits aren't going to hit them again. So, maximum pessimism is probably just about there. What's another company that might be at maximum pessimism right now? What's that? Facebook? Okay. GM? Okay.
They had all the strikes.
They had some strikes. Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I've been reading a lot about IBM lately because they invented the cloud technology, but they weren't a very big part of the market share. And now they're going to start taking a lot of that over, so it's really low. And people had kind of given up on it because
the old dog.
Yeah, they bought, what's that company? Is it Red Hat or something like that?
I'm not sure. I haven't followed that. You have thought?
U.S. Steel.
U.S. Steel.
Very low.
Very low.
Should be very high.
Should be high.
And it will be very high very soon.
You think?
I think.
Yeah. Well, and see, and this is where you got to do your research. And one of the stocks that I bought recently. Now, here's what I do. I just put in Google 52-week low stocks, and usually Yahoo Finance will give you a good list of stocks that are a 52-week low, and I start going down the tickers and seeing who the companies are. And by golly, one day Valero was there at a 52-week low, and now oil was at about $40-something a barrel, and Valero's a San Antonio company. I know the company well. And I think fossil fuels are still going to be a thing for a little while. And I go ahead and take a big chunk of money, put it in Valero. And, you know, I don't know what Valero is today. My phone's in my bag. I think it's pushing at least 80, you know, and it might be 90. I haven't looked at it recently. And here's the one that just came from maximum pessimism. Anybody follow GE, General Electric? So General Electric used to be the sweetheart of companies, yes? And they dropped, and they were hovering around $11 a share. A lot of pessimism, whether they were even going to be around. And I bought at $11 a share. And that was they were at a 52-week low. They were bottomed out at a 52-week low at about 11 a share, and then it went to 9. And the pessimism got worse, and it went to 8. And I got out. It just stayed at 11, and I got out because there was another 52-week low stock that came up that I was interested in, and I jumped into that. And then they dropped to 8, and now today they're trading at 12. So if you bought at maximum pessimism at 8 and you went to 12, how much did you gain? 50%. And that happened in 90 days, 120 days, something like that. It went from there to there. And they got some new leadership. They made some change. And yet, here's where you have to do your own research if you're doing that kind of investing. And I use stocks, although you can use your SEP IRAs and things like this for real estate through what's called a self-directed IRA, I keep that money in the stock market, you know, and I've got, you know, mutual fund accounts, and then I've got accounts where I can stop trading. And when I look at something like GE, the biggest thing about GE is GE one product or one business. It's a conglomerate of all kinds of things. And see, with Boeing, I can look at Boeing and say, they do that as good as anybody else except for right now. Their track record is strong. You know, they've got new leadership. They're almost too big to fail. GE is an old horse that could be broken up and sold off because it's got locomotives, it's got jet engines, it's got healthcare concerns, it's got appliances, it's got all these things. It's not one thing. I can't look at one thing and say that one thing is going to rescue the whole company. I can look at GE and at Boeing, and I can say that one thing is still the one thing. There's nothing to replace it. There's Airbus, right? And there's that airline manufacturer in Canada, and yet is our current leadership in the White House going to let that happen?
You know what's interesting? I used to work for Morgan Stanley, right? So I was listening to a presentation one day, and they're talking about the Dow going up to $30. So I asked the question, what is to stop our markets from collapsing like the Nikkei did? We came with the 45,000 and it went down to 10, right? Back in the 80s and 90s. So the answer I got from these guys who were the experts, they said that we're not Japan. So they have a philosophy where they will protect their businesses from failing. And I hear you mentioning a few times, too good to fail, too good to fail. But see, that was the philosophy back in 2005, that we would just let businesses fail because we could, the other business would come in that would do a better job and flourish. So now we're kind of in that other mindset where we are not protecting.
Yeah. Well, we saw it with automotive, with Ford and you know, Chrysler and Chevy and all that. So let's watch. So here's something I talked to you about Acorn earlier. And this was on, and I didn't know anything about Acorn until I'm on our Maps Coaches Facebook page one day. And I see this post, and Sajid Patel, who is one of our executives there at MAP, said, Matt Teeter posted this, and I wanted you to ensure that you all saw it as well. He said, at our head coaches retreat, we all discussed an action we would take last year at the retreat. We downloaded this application, connected to our bank accounts, and we just let it run. This year we compared our accounts, and they were anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000. Drew Lee is one of our great coaches, introduced all of this to us. Maybe you have this set up, maybe you aren't interested, maybe you're curious, and yet check it out. Now, the way that Acorn works, I didn't download the other slide, is Acorn, you connect it to your credit cards, your debit cards, and if I go to McDonald's down here and I get a cheeseburger and a Coke, and it's $3, and well, it was more than that, it's $6.13, my Acorn account is going to round that up to $7, and those 80-something cents are going to go into my Acorn investment account. And so what these guys did, just having it tied to their credit cards or debit cards, anywhere from $5 to $10 or even more $1,000 went, just from the rounding up process, went right into their investment account. You can go right into an IRA, and Acorn is, depending on how you use it, it's like $1, $2, or $3 a month in fees. It's very inexpensive. And again, I intend to put this on my accounts. I haven't yet. I saw this last month, and I'm going, that is cool. And I've gone out and I've looked at the app. I went to the App Store and I looked at it and read a little bit about it. I said, I'm going to do a little bit more research, because anyway, anytime I'm putting money somewhere, I don't want to just because somebody said it, right? Who's behind it? What's the history? You know, and yet, if I'm rounding up my purchases, each of my purchases, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, you keep doing that over time, and if it's invested, and it's going right into investments, it's not going into a checking account or a savings account, it's going into investment account. And whether it's your IRA or whether it's just a mutual fund or whatever it is, how easy would that make it just to put aside $3,000, $4,000, $5,000? So
you haven't finished research? Right?
No, I'm making you aware of it, because I mean, these are the kind of things where I'm not going to be responsible for telling you it's the best thing since sliced bread.
But you will email us once you find it.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I find out. Now, there's another app out there around investing, which came to my attention this week as well. This one I've been aware of for a month. One that came to my attention this last week was one called Robinhood. And Robinhood is a no-cost stock trade resource, and apparently they've got, over 1 million accounts, and so I have to go back and going, well, companies that don't have any fees, what's their profit model, right? Because I mean, if they don't have a profit model, there's a problem there long term. That's why WeWork has had all these problems, right? They weren't making a profit. SoftBank and these people that were funding them, that had failed, go public launch, and all of those things. So we talk about investing, and what I really want to take on next is what to think about the economy. So how many of you think the economy has more upside than downside, or you think this can sustain? Who thinks what we have going on right now can sustain for another 7, 8, or 10 years? As long as interest rates stay low. How many of you think we might be in for a surprise before too long? Okay. Here's the truth. Nobody knows. And yet there are some clues. Would you like to know a clue?
Election year.
Election year is a big one. All right, that's a hell of a big one. And because we have two different completely philosophies around what happens with taxes, the impact on corporations' taxes, entitlements, and there's a lot of things to bear there.
Can we look at history?
Huh?
Can we look at history?
We can. Here's history. So here's some history for you. So despite all of that, now, Gary Keller, when I became a team leader and started working with Gary handed me a book and said, I want you to read this. And it was The Roaring 2000s by Harry Dent. And I read it, and then there were some other books that Dent wrote. And Dent is an economist. And Dent bases a lot of his economic theory on birth cycles, population, demographics. And one of the key, now we're told that what percentage of the economy is consumer spending? Anybody know? Yeah. 70%. So 70% of what drives the economy, what drives the stock market, what drives, everything is consumer spending. So that's you guys going to the Apple store to buy an iPhone. It's going to Target to get, whatever you're going to get at Target. It's going out there into the world and spending money is 70% of the economy. And now, if you know who's generally doing the most spending and in what age group, can you predict to some degree how much spending is going to be in the economy? Does that make sense? So here we look at this. So what we see in terms of change in spending at each age and stage of life. So obviously a single person 18 to 22 is a little limited in their spending capacity, correct? And then they become young and married. Do they start to maybe spend a little bit more? And when they get into young family formation, are there more demands to need to spend? And then, of course, as they get into, so they're saying that's the 31 to 42 is young families. 46 to 50 is considered the peak spending age. Now, empty nesters, what's happening at 50? Are people starting to maybe start to tighten up a little bit? And we talk about the average. We don't talk about people that have maybe a lot of discretionary money, because that's not the majority of the population, is it?
You don't have as much needs. You don't have as many dependents. You don't have kids at home.
I think those numbers are kicked up a little bit though, because there are a lot of people who aren't getting married now till their 30s.
Yeah.
And so I know people in their 50s that have 7 and 8 year olds.
Yeah.
Well,
and those might be
mine
out.
is perfectly right exactly where I am right now.
What's that?
I said I feel like mine is perfectly exactly where I am right now.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing. So baby boomers, the baby boomer era was born 46 to 64. And so that group right now is 55 to 73 years old. Now that was the biggest generation till what group? The millennials, right? And so now if the baby boomers are over here in the empty nester phase, a lot of them are already in the retired phase. What's happening in consumer spending with that group? It's gone down. Yeah, and they're working to save more. Now, it actually, some of that did get delayed because when we had that economic big challenge in 2007, 8 through 2010, 11, a lot of needs were repressed. And then, you had the recovery where you get a little hockey stick and where people had certain needs, purchases they didn't make, cars, whatever it was. And then, yet historically it says they're going to start curbing some of their spending. Now, Generation X, now that was a much smaller generation. They're now 39 to 54, and yet they don't have the same buying power the boomers did. And yet, look at millennials. Millennials were born 81 to 96, so they're now 23. They're in this phase right here on the low end. The second wave is 23 years old right now at the very back end. On the front end, they're 38 years old. They're about right here. What are the millennials doing right now for the economy? If you said these are the peak spending years, what could the millennials be for the economy?
Well, they're investing it because they're the ones that are really involved in technology. Mm-hmm. They want the best gaming systems. They want the biggest TVs. They want all those things.
So if you look at this, you could actually surmise that we might have enough consumer power over the next dozen years to have what kind of economy? A really healthy economy. Now that doesn't mean the stock market isn't overpriced right now. Could it correct 15%? Maybe it correct 20%. And yet there's a couple of factors that come into this, and that is that if you search value, and the reason I was talking about companies like Boeing and so forth is if I'm really selective in some of the choices that I make, foundationally, I believe I've got another 10 or 12 years of consumer power. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have government come in and muck it up, right? It doesn't mean that we have entanglements that we get into internationally that can mess it up. Can those things happen? These are wild cards that you don't know. And those entanglements likely, will hopefully be, if they happen, short duration. And they could knock us down for a little while, and yet you have to look at this and say, are the fundamentals, like a consumer, still there? So if we got in a war with Iran, and the stock market took a 40% hit, should I get out of the stock market? Buy. What's that?
Buy.
I should buy. Well, why should I buy? Because the consumer is still going to be there demographically. Does this make sense? It also means this group's going to be buying real estate. So we've got real estate demands that are going through these household formations, through their empty nester phase, when they start to come down a few years later. It looks like we've got a dozen years of pretty healthy opportunity. Now, so if it went down 20 or 30%, I'd probably stay in. Now that's me. I'm not telling you to do that, right? And yet I would stay in because I believe the consumer is still there. And that's 70% of the economy. And as long as things weren't done, like poor corporate tax structure, things like that caused corporate health to go down long term. I mean, these are all things you have to think about and do some reading about. Maybe get Dow Theory newsletter or something like that, things that will educate you. Now here's something I want to share with you. So this comes from Harry Dent. Now the blue is the birth cycle adjusted for peak spending. And so the baby boomer, the earlier part of the baby boomer is starting to be, let's go back to the years. Baby boomer was born 46 to 64. And so they would be hit, the ones born in 46, would, if 46 was their peak spending year, beginning of their peak spending period, that would be 92, correct? So let's see what's happening around 90. So this is 1990. What's starting to happen around 92? You see, this is where you're seeing the birth rate extended out 46 years, where the birth rates are climbing. You see, before that it was really low. What's happening to the Dow Jones? It's following these cycles. Now, we had a little problem right here because all these people that were out there that didn't have the ability to buy a home, all these people in that population, the government decided we needed to have very loose lending, and it caused a what? A subprime mortgage meltdown. So in here where this should have still been peaking, we had a meltdown. Now, here's one of the things that Dent predicted. Gary had us reading Harry Dent, and Harry Dent said, now what you have to really be careful about, it's going to peak around 2008. Can you see it right here? It's going to peak around 2008, and it's going to rapidly decline because you're going to have the big part of that group now starting to reduce their spending. And he said the market's going to take a crash around 2008, 2009, 2010 at the latest. Did the market take a big crash? Except it didn't happen for the reasons he said. It wasn't necessarily demographic driven, it was driven by policy. And was it likely going to happen anyway? It may. And yeah, I think the wild card that got not accounted for completely in this was immigration. And it says immigration adjusted births lag for peak spending. And yet, we had a lot of immigration, from different parts of the world. And this is national. The other thing we have to talk about is net migration to Texas, and what does it mean locally? Now, here's what he said also. We were reading this back, and now here's a decision I made based upon this. Based upon studying this, I'm a team leader at the Northwest Market Center, and it's time to negotiate our lease. We're up for renewal. And knowing this, the landlord wanted us to re-up to like 2012 or 2013, and based upon, because I think it was it must have been 2012, wanted us to do a 10-year lease, and I negotiated to have our lease expire in 2009. Why did I want it to expire in 2009? What's that? Well, if this showed up, I wanted to be in a negotiation position. Yeah, I wanted to be in a place where, who knew if it was going to show up or not? And yet the demographic statistics were not debatable. You know, the baby boomer is going to be going away. It's not open for debate. Statistically, it is. And you can't fight math. It is. It's absolute. And so, you know, the great thing is when that lease was coming up 2000, I think it was 2009, around that time, well, they were able to get a sweetheart deal on the building they're in today and negotiate a really low, you know, lease terms because it was right in the middle of poor economic times. And, you know, and so you look at these things. Now, here's what Dan also said. He said, expect a strong recovery beginning about 2020, 2021. Now, because we had a big dip, our recovery started earlier, and part of our recovery being so strong is something you said earlier, somebody said earlier, low what? Low interest rates. You know, we probably are stronger than we should be right now because of this thing called quantitative easing, where the government's throwing all this money, you know, into keeping rates low and everything else. If they hadn't done that, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't know if our policy people are really smart or they didn't care. I'm going to lean on hopefully they were smart. Because if they understood this, they would say, we just need to keep our economy on the rails until about what? 2021. 2020, 2021. If we keep our economy on the rails, the consumers start showing back up at a really high level in here, and look what starts to happen. And it looks like we got a little dip that's going to show up about when? 2040 something in population curve. And then we got a big fall starting what? About a 2050s. Well, let's say about 2050, I'd be getting my powder really dry, you know, because it looks like we're in for a fall. So, I mean, you look at this, the consumer's a pretty big play for the next what? At least 20 years, right? Because, I mean, it's just now coming on the upswing, and the consumer is just going to get more and more powerful. We're going to see a little dip here, so we're 20, 30 something. So give me some ahas around this. What's getting you here? Good time to be in real estate. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'll get out of debt.
Yay!
I'm trying to figure out where I want to retire. Yeah. And if I'm going to be able to last doing this till I want to retire.
Yeah.
It's like 2070.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you, dear. That's a lot. That's a vote.
Yeah, I'm going to be worm food by then. So there you go. You know. and yet think about playing that cash flow game with kids right now. Think about, you know, if they set themselves up right now, buy some real estate in the right markets, right? My daughter and my oldest daughter and her my son-in-law live in Jackson, Mississippi, and I talked to her about real estate investing, and I said, we've got to go buy some real estate, and yet they want to move to Florida ideally. I said, well, if you're committed to moving there, let's decide if you're moving to Pensacola where the in-laws are. And if you are, let's start buying real estate there now. You know, we've got the in-laws there. Let's find some opportunities to buy real estate. And, you know, you guys are, you know, just 30 years old right now. And, you know, you're set up for life with just, doesn't have to be a lot of purchases. Fully fund your retirement accounts. You know, you've got these kind of things coming in your favor. You know, make some good choices. You know, the Dow Jones in any 7-year period is you know, it will return you 9% historically. And yet if you go in and out, it might not, you know, and so if there's a crisis, you got the consumer for quite a while. And if 70% of the economy is working for you, short of government screwing it up, which I don't have a lot of faith in necessarily. Yeah, you know, you just, you know, because there's, you know, what one group does, the other one undoes. So, you know, who knows? And yet the consumer's still going to be there. And the consumer's going to need resources and the fundamentals, and that's working in our favor. And then if you know, take a good balanced approach. Real estate, now here's the thing about real estate here. We go back and, you know, go back to Kiyosaki. So we're talking about the investment side. The business side, you know, how are we doing on time? Okay. Somebody asked that I talk about AutoConnect in here today. What do y'all know about AutoConnect? Okay. What's the most important, given that we've got a great economy ahead, potentially, we've got another thing that works in our favor, being where we live, is net migration. People are leaving places like New York and California and you know, Washington State and Oregon, and where are they moving? They're moving to the south. And net migration, we've got this huge positive net migration of people moving to, there was an article the other day that San Antonio is the new hotspot for millennials. You know, affordability, you know, tech jobs, and, you know, biotech, and the things that are happening there. You know, Austin's the keep it weird place gotta be, right? And, you know, all these, y'all seen the Pflugerville bumper sticker, right? Caught between a rock and a hard place. A weird place, caught between a rock and a weird place. There you go, yeah, a rock and a weird place. So I want to talk to you about the number one thing that, if you're going to get your business part of this right, to take your self-employed job and to make it a business, what's the most important asset you have? Because we're talking about assets and building assets. What's the number one asset we have as real estate agents? Not ourselves. Say that again? Database. And what's in our database?
All your relationships.
Relationships. You know, a database is a collection of relationships. And so I want to share with y'all a story, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about AutoConnect, because we're going to make a very distinct push to get people enrolled in AutoConnect. So is anybody in here on AutoConnect? Okay, none of this crew. We've got about, I think, 30 or so agents on AutoConnect. Ask Casey Jorgensen, he's got his entire team on it, for example. And yet, I guess it was year before last, I left the Market Center. I was here at the Market Center. I'm on 130. I'm driving to San Antonio. And I get a phone call. It's like July 7th. And I get a phone call, and on my dash, the caller ID, or it's my contact information, says Barbara DeLamo. And who's ever gotten a call and you're going, who the hell is that? And the name shows up, and it says Barbara DeLamo. I'm going, who the hell's Barbara DeLamo? She's in my contacts. I must know her, and it's a 2-1 area code, so I know it's San Antonio. So I go ahead and I take the call, and I say, hey, Barbara, not having a clue who Barbara is. Right? And she goes, well, and she talks like this. I have to use her accent. So she goes, well, hi, Steve. I go, well, hi, Barbara. And she goes, well, I said, what can I do for her? And she goes, well, I was just calling to wish you happy birthday. And I go, well, thanks. And she says, and I say to her, I said, well, Barbara, you're a little early. My birthday's not till the end of the month. She goes, I know, I want to be the first one, am I? And I go, you sure are. I don't think she knew. I think she was just fast on her feet. You know, and so she goes, am I the first one? I said, you sure are. And then Barbara goes on, and and I still don't have a clue who Barbara is, right? And you know, voice, just nothing, none of it registers. And she goes, well, golly, are you still coaching bowled out there? And I say, I sure am. She goes, you know, I took my first bowl with you back in 2009. It was the first one that was ever done. I'm going, all right, so now I know the connection, right? She's a bowl student. Couldn't pick her out of the lineup. You know, I still don't have a clue who she is. And she goes, were you still coaching bowled? And I said, I sure am. And where are you doing it? And she just goes on and on about this. And then she goes, well, you know, I know when you were teaching bowled, you had that honey of yours. What's her name? Are you guys still together? I said, Shelly? She goes, yeah, Shelly. She came and sponsored one of our bowls. And she goes, you guys still together? I said, we sure are. I said, yeah, she seemed really cool. And She said, matter of fact, you even talked about moving to San Antonio. Did you ever move to San Antonio? I said, yeah, I've been there almost 3 years. She goes, well, damn, I was a day late and $1 short, she says. And of course I mentioned, well, of course I represented myself, and we're having this conversation. And she goes, well, what are you loving about San Antonio? I said, well, it's kind of home for me. My family, originally settled around Cibolo and all that area. So it's kind of like home. And we're talking about this, and she goes, well, what kind of big plans you and Shelly have coming up? We talked about a trip to Egypt and, these kind of things. And then we wrapped up the phone call, and I hung up, and I go, that was it was like a 4-minute conversation. And I hung up, and I'm going, that was really a nice call. And then all of a sudden I realized, I realized I hit the wrong button. I realized that I had been forwarded. What's forward stand for? Family or friends, occupation, recreation, dreams. She asked me about my work. You still doing both? She said, what's that girl's name? Shelly. Yeah, so you guys still together? She talks about that. What are you loving about, San Antonio? Recreation. What are you doing for fun? She even gave me some tips. What are your future plans, goals? Those are dreams, right? And I'm going, man, I just got forwarded. And it was a great conversation. And, I felt this connection to Barbara. Still couldn't figure out a lineup. I had this thing in me. I said, I got to go check into this, because did I pick up the phone just because her name was there? Or was there some other reason was she even vaguely familiar to me? And I went to my computer, and here's what I saw. I pulled up my email, and Barbara had been sending me emails every few weeks, going back for like 7 years. And she comes up on the dash, and I don't have a clue who she is. I couldn't pick her out of a lineup. The name didn't ring a bell, and here I've been getting an email every 3 weeks or so.
So those were not accomplishing her goals.
Yeah. Not accomplishing her goals. Yeah. So here's the thing I do. I'm seeing this, and then I open one of them, and I'm going through it, and I'm going, it's kind of a nice little email. I go through, that's what she looks like, right? And I'm going, and I still couldn't, if you put that picture in front of me, I don't know that person, right? I've been getting these emails, and I probably didn't look at any of them. Now, a couple of weeks later, I get an email from Barbara, and what do? I actually opened it. See, something happened where now Barbara is connected to me. She's had a value-added phone call, a conversation, and we're in flow. We're connected. We're in flow. We've got a rhythm going, and all she has to do now is keep communicating with me, and ideally over multiple channels. Is it not just one channel of email? Maybe it's direct mail, the phone call, a text message occasionally. What is she going to do to take a multi-channel approach to connecting with me? And this Gary Keller, the interview with Brad Inman at Inman Connect. Anybody here subscribe to Inman? Yes. Inman's kind of the authority on stuff, right? Especially technology. And this 20-minute interview, I don't think I've got the video embedded in there. No, I don't. At the very end, Brad Inman, because they're talking about all the new players in the industry, all the disruption, all the change, all the venture capital. And Brad Inman asked Gary at the very end, what's the one thing agents have to do to prepare themselves for the change and to prosper in the market ahead? Does anybody remember what Gary said?
Relationships.
He said, you got to be in relationship with the people in your database. You got to focus on adding value to them, being their trusted advisor, pick up the phone and talk to them.
And we are in Overcommit.
You are, yeah, I know you are. There you go. And so what we did is, and when Gary says, be the local trusted real estate advisor, and he talks about it's better to be hyper local. And as much as, neighborhood nurture smart plans and things like that are coming out, can be a part of that, it's tough to put together really true hyper-local content, yes? And so what we decided to do is that we would be your partner in doing it. And so some of the agents from both market centers are kind of on a content committee. And this is currently a direct mail campaign of 2 direct mail pieces a month. Now, by the way, Gary Keller and the Millionaire Real Estate Agent second edition, first edition they subscribed to, Ideal Touches was 33 a year. Now it's 36 a year. Now think about that, 36 touches a year. The people in your database are getting a tap every what? Every 10 days. Now we know from the Barbara story, it can't be just send them a bunch of emails, can it? That's a way to just, and it doesn't mean they're going to unsubscribe. It just means that you become irrelevant. Yeah, I mean, you're just not relevant, and there's not a connection or a relationship there. And see, now here's the challenge for me as I grew my real estate business. I'm not high social. And Jerry Misko, anybody know Jerry Misko?
Yes.
Yeah, Jerry's, I think she's retired now. Jerry and I were at Century 21. We started our career. Well, she was in a career a long time. And I come into real estate, and we're in a cubicle area, and Jerry's cube is behind mine. And she sees one day how hard I'm working at getting my career started. And Jerry says, Steve, you know what you got to do to have a really successful long-term career? She said, just be friends with all your clients. And I'm thinking to myself, I got 4 friends. I don't need any more friends. I need some buyers and sellers, damn it. Come on. And that was anxiety provoking for me, because going social is not my natural state. I can turn it on and off for a little while, and yet it's not my natural state. And so what I learned later was that I didn't have to be everybody's best friend. I could be their trusted advisor. I could be like their Schwab representative. I mean, if you had a Schwab investment account and your Schwab advisor called you once a quarter to give you an update on what they're watching or trends, would that piss you off? No, you'd probably be what? Kind of impressed that they actually pay attention and keep me informed. What I learned is I could be that person for my people in the space of what? Real estate. Right? And that was liberating for me. And so when we built AutoConnect, we said, well, how do we help you go out and build that position of the local trusted expert with a hyper-local look and content? And we're going to focus on a print campaign right now. Now, by the way, this print campaign is going to be just like an email campaign if you don't do what? Call, text, stay connected, with them, add value. And yet this can be a bridge builder. And so if we're doing 2 of those a month, that's 24 of your 36 touches. If you call them 4 times a year, that's another 4, now you're to 28. You do 1 email a month, don't over email them, and now you're at 40 touches. Does that cover you? And yet you could do all the other stuff. If you never called them, would you have the same relationship with them? You wouldn't. So, Gary said the goal is to be the economist's choice for your local real estate market. It's your professional duty to provide them perspective. And I throw this thing up of community impact, because we all hear that newspapers are dead, yes? Right. And yet when you get this one in the mail, do you get pretty excited about it? I do. Y'all like getting impact? Why do you like impact?
Local news, local stuff.
Local and relevant. So this is how you win with your consumer. You don't send them recipe cards and stuff. What's really local? You could go take a position. You become local, useful. Everyone gets it, right? You become this in the real estate space for your folks. So this is something that Larry Kendall shared with me. Zillow did a study. They took 13,000, almost 250 households that had closed a year prior. And they asked them, how much contact did you have from your agent after closing? 74%, never. 20% occasionally, only 6% regularly. Say ouch. Biggest missed opportunity. Now, here's an interesting conversation. You've had all these players come into the game, haven't you? Purple Bricks is now gone. Open Door, OfferPad, Zillow Instant Offers, and this wheel right here represents an 8-year buy-sell cycle. So and it's kind of leaning more towards 10 now, and yet with the millennials coming in, it might kind of come back to 8, and they start chasing careers and things like this. But at an 8-year buy-sell cycle, most of we've heard the talk about AI and artificial intelligence and all that, right? What the AI wants to do is figure out when that green slice is going to show up. When is somebody going to make a decision demographically, clicks, what they're doing, and the AI intends to figure that out. So they're playing the game for when the next transaction is going to happen. There's a game you get to play if you're in touch with your database. You might know what that game is? The referral game. So there's a Harris Interactive poll that said each American household knows at least 4 people who moved last year. So it means every single person in your database. Now, do they know some of them after the fact? Do they know some of them before? And so it's not 100% that you could get them all. And yet you look at this and you go, okay, so what's the game? So you think of it this way: if every one of these, and I don't know why my slide got so funky, is if you have every year there's 4 referral opportunities just from every person in your database, correct? Now in the year they move, there's 6 because there could be 2 sides in the year they move. Does that make sense? So when we look at all this, the lifetime value is if I go through 4 cycles in my career with my database and there's 34 per cycle, there could be 136 total transactions. I'm sorry. Let me back up. So you got 7 times 4 is 28, and then in one cycle, there's 34 opportunities. And if I go through 4 cycles in my career with them, 4 8-year cycles, 30 years in real estate, there's 136 total transaction potential between referrals and their own business from one person. Does that make sense? Now, does that happen if you're not in touch with them? Does it? And by the way, if you only captured 15% of that, you're not going to capture it all. This is just how rich the fertile land is. And if I go start to if I put my hook and my bait out there, I got a good chance of catching something, right? And the bait on the hook is the value add that I give my database. And what the hell is that? Okay, all right. I don't know what I did there. Slides got funky. So what we did is we say, goodness gracious. I don't know what I did, sorry. So anyway, what we did is we said, okay, what would be our prescription, ideally? And so we put together 8 local economist graphic postcards. And so this is what, the AutoConnect program is. 4 print quarterly hyper-local newsletter. So every quarter there's a newsletter. And then 12 item of value direct mail pieces. And then 8 trusted real estate advisor hyper-local emails. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So essentially, there's your 24 touches that make up AutoConnect. Make sure that adds up. Yeah, well, the 8 local economist infographic postcards is actually this. So it's actually 12, 4, and 8. So somewhere something rolled over in my email. So to get great results from your database, and what we would say is a 10% return would be great results. Meaning if I've got 150 in my database, there should be how many transactions come out of that with direct business or referral business? At least 15. That's a 10% return in any one year, and that's completely doable. And yet, if you're putting AutoConnect to work, and then we're going to work on the AutoConnect email campaign as we get a little closer to smart plans, custom smart plans, is our thought to you is the standard you've got to bring to bear if you're going to do this is, first, it's best that they like you, yes? I mean, don't send stuff people don't like you, right? Are these people, I know who they are, and am I willing to call them a minimum of 2 times, ideally how many times? 4, but a minimum of what? too. And then maybe I blend some texting in there and some social media connecting, and yet I've got to be willing to make these calls. Now, here's an example of the newsletter. So the newsletter comes out once a quarter, and who we have up there? Alexis is on this one. And we profiled an article we got from Kalahari that they had on CNN Business, and profiling what was going on with the Kalahari Resort. And actually, this was more of a human interest story around the founder of Kalahari, stuff that hadn't been in Impact or the local media. Texas is a magnet for the millennial generation, and where are millennials moving? And so, do you look like an expert when this shows up in their hands? I mean, you know what's going on, right? And then every month we do a item of value postcard, and it features a local artist, how to contact the local artist, a print, of that. It's a jumbo postcard, and on the back side it's local events. It's what's happening in the community.
Because that'll hit their fridge.
Huh?
That's the kind of thing that people would put on their fridge.
This has staying power. Yeah, it has staying power because it's 6 weeks or so of what's happening, and it's not just it might be things as far away as San Marcos or places they wouldn't even know about. And so it kind of thinks, oh, we could go here, tomorrow afternoon or for the weekend, or make that happen. You know that girl, don't you?
I do.
You know that one?
And that boy.
That boy too.
My son.
That's their son. Yeah, good man. And now, by the way, so that every month you have this postcard goes out every month. On the months you don't have the newsletter, there's a second postcard of the month, and it's an infographic card. So this one is very real estate focused. So every month there's something that positions you as the local real estate what? Expert. And so this is here we got Williamson County, Travis County. This was the end of 2018. What's happening. So we've beta this very successful. On the backside we have what does this mean? Calls to action. We've got better. The team has got better about making sure they get their calls to action in here, what this means and what they should do and why they should contact you to get their questions answered. This was an early one. That one was too busy, and yet it was a very powerful conversation about what it all meant. And so, all right, my slides got really screwed up. So here's what we did. We worked with a local print mail vendor. In fact, Rachel Payton is the person who put all the systems together for us. So she built all the systems and put all this together. And if you have 100 people in your database, it's $1.48 a month to have a person on AutoConnect. How much? $1.48. Now, that's a pretty cheap investment. Now, if you've got 100 people, you're going to spend $148 a month, and yet if you get a 10% return on your database, if you get 10 transactions at $7,000, your return's how much money? Is $148 a month for $70,000 a good return? I don't know. Y'all tell me. Okay, we're talking about wealth building. Rate of return is an important deal.
Right.
150, you're going to spend $222 a month for a potential of 105. 200, you're going to spend $296 a month for 40,000 in potential income at a 10% return. And yet my message to you is don't do it if you're not going to pick up the what? The phone. This is a great, supplement. And then, of course, picking up the phone, just use the DTD2 system. Kristen Schlesinger, I was holding her board for a board breaking at Coach's Skills Camp, and she said, DTD2 changed my world. And I'm doing, it got me to 12 million, like that, and just following, making my contacts to my database via DTD2. And y'all know how that works. So, all right. So, let's hear some ahas from, now, by the way, here's what I'm going to do. Does anybody in here got an interest in AutoConnect? Okay. I'm going to have an AutoConnect workshop. We'll put it on the calendar, that takes you through, we have the forms, the frequently asked questions, how you present your database, what pictures we need. We work with a print mail vendor in Cedar Park, Minuteman Press, that does all the graphics and all the work for us. And we have a Google form that allows you to update. If you're updating less than 5, you just update through the Google form. If you're going to have a mass update, you send it to us on a spreadsheet, and we can handle all that. And you just have to have it in by the 1st of each month, any updates that you want. And we keep it clean, and it's all done for you. You don't have to touch it. If you want to get involved in the content committee and driving the content, we would love for you to do that because it's your thing. How this fits into today's conversation is, I'm sorry my slides got boogered up, is you're never going to have your real estate practice become that if you don't have your database in order. Is that a fair statement? If you're, where we're heading in our business, relationships are everything, the relationships in your database are everything, and it'll never become that if we don't drive it through the database. It'll always be dependent on you, likely at a self-employed level, or it'll never reach the gross margins or net margins you desire if you don't get that in order. You can probably still generate a lot without doing it. You could do like the guy I had yesterday who spent $231,000 on Realtor.com and Zillow, to generate his business, and yet I don't want that expense if the market takes a squat, right, or a shift. And and by the way, could they change their practices and their algorithms overnight? They already did. They do, right? And Zillow changed its policies. And so, what are some thoughts? Give me a few ahas from today. What are you taking out of here? What are you maybe excited about? Was this valuable for you today?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm hoping that was good. Yeah, so we'll give you a couple ahas. I always like to hear the ahas. What are you walking away with that you can use?
The FHFA.gov.
Yeah, FHFA, yeah. And, that is a great resource. And again, that's every quarter. You've got those materials. Just watch for in the next couple of weeks for the new one to come out. So, yeah. Thank you, Tara.
So how often do you Google the 52-week low stock market?
Whenever I feel like I've got either I'm going to sell something and I got to go find a home for it, or if I've just made my IRA contribution, I put it into my IRA into a money market account where I park it until I figure out what I'm going to go buy, and I'll figure out a couple of candidates and then I'll base it on that. Right now, I made my SEP contribution. I did my extension this year and didn't finish my taxes till early October, and so that's when I did my SEP contribution. So it's been sitting in a money market for about, since mid-October, and I've been kind of busy. And so I said, I got to put that money to work, and I'm feeling like Boeing's, I've got to go do a little investigation. I feel like Boeing is right for a little bump, and I could be wrong. I thought GE was right for a little bump, and then I got out of it because it just stayed flat. And yet then it came down, and then it did bump. And yet, so sometimes you just got to wait it out a little longer. Southwest was really good to me when they hit a 52-week low, and really made it out. And that's just one of those things. You just believe in it. You know their history and their folklore, that they're good. A couple more ahas. What jumped out at you? Acorn. Yeah, I love the name of that too. It's like you plant little acorn.
But I just thought it was so small. I don't know why I didn't dig into it, but
yeah,
it makes sense.
Well, you gonna look into it? Absolutely. Share with me anything you find. You might look into it before I do, and I got my plate's a little full, and you get some insights. Let me know, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a quick question regarding AutoConnect. Is that only for database, or can we use the same thing for new listings, that same?
That is your database name, new listings.
Are you talking about just listed cards?
No. Yeah, like just listed.
Yeah, this is not that.
This is database management.
This is just your drip, your 24 touches of direct mail drip campaign.
Okay. People you meet in open houses and people you meet, you can put those in there.
Yeah. So you.
Well,
So you're referring to changing the content and stuff.
Yeah.
This is like step content.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
It's hyper local, but it's not your evidence of success content.
That's right. So that's a different.
That's a different thing.
Those people from
in command under campaign, you can do
I knew, okay, there we go.
There you go. Just talk to him about that. There you go. That's your local, he's your local expert on that thing. I know my ceiling of achievement, you know, where I'm going to not be the expert on that stuff. So, two more ahas, and we're going to wrap it up.
The generational swing of seeing that it was pretty strong. You know, if you go back to 70%.
There's a lot of wild cards. I mean, there's geopolitical issues. There's, you know, government issues. You know, keep in mind quantitative easing has, you know, kept us. And I think maybe they were smart enough somewhere, because they never want to, you know, you never know all the behind the scenes. Maybe they were smart enough to know the consumer's coming back in our favor, and if we just keep the economy going, so the consumer comes back in our favor, you know, we're okay. And yet they never talk to the public like that, because we just get confused, right? Would be is their idea, you know.
But you know, when interest rates go up, all that money from quantitative easing goes into the stock market, because you can't get a return on your money anywhere else. So now that when interest rates go back up to like 4 or 5%, possibly 6% in cash, all that money's going to go flying out of the stock market. That's my big concern.
Good.
That's
Good. And that's why you got to buy value, right? You know, that becomes that thing. And by the way, and this is where you think long term. You remember the consumer's still in my favor, right? And if there's just a downplay, you know, at this point in time, if there was a dip, like I said, I wouldn't get out, because I see the consumer is with me, and that's 70% of the economy, and that gives me the confidence to stay the course.
I think that's good. That was an aha from me.
Yeah.
That and the demographics, the amount of people that are here.
And if you want to read up on any of this, you know, Harry Dent Jr. is the economist that, you know, that comes from. I don't buy into everything that he puts out, you know, because he thinks there's a major crash on the horizon, and
Spell
you know.
last name, please.
Huh? D-E-N-T. Dent. Yeah, Harry Dent Jr. You know, and yet, you know, and you see, because we could be overvalued, even though the consumer is with us. Could we be overvalued? Look at PE ratios, you know, price to earnings ratios on some of the stocks, and going, yeah, there's a lot of upside in this, and we could get flat. And yet, if I buy value, you know, I'm probably going to be okay, and you know, educate myself. You know, get a newsletter like Dow Theory or something like that you subscribe to, and you know, spend $300 a year to subscribe to something and start to educate yourself. I just subscribed to Dow Theory because a friend of mine turned me onto it, because they assess things very simply. I'm a simple person. You know, I'm really good with numbers and finance and all this, and yet all this stuff that I'm not going to read it all. And I need somebody that I can trust to summarize it in a way that makes sense to me and gives me what I need to know. And I was telling him about this, and he said, well, Dow Theory is really working. This is a guy who's a really successful investor. And he says, Dow Theory's really been good for me. So, again, I haven't spent much time with it yet, and just subscribed in the last week. And yet that's where part of my research, looking at, you know, what's on their buy list and hold list and sell list and why and those kind of things. So, guys, thanks for being here. I'll put out, I got an email list. Did everybody sign it? I'll send you my slides. I'll clean up the ones that were boogered up. I will let all y'all know when we're going to have an AutoConnect workshop. It'll be fairly soon. And then I'll let you know when the next one of these is going to occur and what the topic will be. Okay? Thanks, guys. Yeah.
A few years ago, we gathered all the smartest people we knew: agents, market centers and regional leaders, technologists, data scientists, and asked them some big questions. What does it look like when technology is simple, smarter, and more human? How can we ensure agents stay at the center of the transaction where their clients want them? How do we accomplish this while eliminating the cost? It's called Command, and it's going to change the way we do business. Start by adding contacts directly, or through a simple voice command with Kelly. All calls, texts, notes, and any other customized fields are synced automatically across all platforms. When you add a new contact to Command, a neighborhood is automatically associated with their address. That way you can share the most pertinent information, such as migration patterns or median home price. Marketing materials have evolved from one-to-many to one-to-one, providing value at the home and neighborhood level for everyone in your database. And with Command, your business is not restricted by IDX. Wherever your clients are, there you are. Another challenge agents identified was the complexity added to the transaction by piecing together different systems connected by spreadsheets. We solved this by ensuring Command aggregated offers, documents, and communications with your client and broker, all in one place. Get a quick overview of your listings, appointments, contracts, closed deals, revenue projections, and customized reporting. Command shines a light on your business so you're never left in the dark. Housed within the Command dashboard is Lead Accelerator, an intelligent marketing tool. Get leads through ROI and AI-optimized ad campaigns across Facebook, Instagram, Google